Hi guys, still reading our Charlie and the Chocolate Factory book, and again 2 chapters because they're small. I think we're probably going to end up reading 2 chapters every day at this rate. So we're on chapter 9, which is Grandpa Joe Takes a Gamble. The next day, when Charlie came home from school and went in to see his grandparents, he found that only Grandpa Joe was awake. The other 3 were snoring loudly. Whispered Grandpa Joe as he beckoned Charlie to come closer. Charlie tiptoed over and stood beside the bed. The old man gave Charlie a sly grin, and he started rummaging under his pillow with one hand. And when the hand came out again, there was an ancient leather purse clutched in the fingers. Under the cover of the bedclothes, the old man opened the purse, tipped it upside down, and out fell a single sixpence. "It's my secret hoard," he whispered. "The others don't know I've got it. And now you and I are going to have one more fling at finding this last ticket. How about it, eh? But you'll have to help me." "Are you sure you won't spend your money on that, Grandpa?" Charlie whispered. "Of course I am," sputtered the old man excitedly. "Don't stand there arguing. I'm as keen as you are to find a ticket. Here, take the money and run down to the street, the nearest shop, and buy the first Wonka bar you see. Bring it straight back to me and we'll open it together." Charlie took the little silver coin and slipped quickly out of the room. In 5 minutes he was back. "Have you got it?" whispered Grandpa Joe. His eyes were shining with excitement. Charlie nodded and held out the bar of chocolate. "Wonka's Nutty Crunch Surprise," it said on the wrapper. "Good," the old man said. Sitting up in his bed, he started to rub his hands. "Now come over here and sit close to me and we'll open it together. Are you ready?" "Yes," said Charlie, "I'm ready." "All right, you tear off the first bit." "No," said Charlie, "you paid for it. You do it all." The old man's fingers were trembling most trembly as they fumbled with the wrapper. "We don't have a hope, really," he whispered, giggling a bit. "Do you know what we don't have? A hope, don't you?" "Yes," Charlie said, "I know." They looked at each other and both started giggling nervously. "Mind you," said Grandpa Joe, "there is just that tiny chance that it might be the one. Don't you agree?" "Yes," Charlie said, "of course. Why don't you open it, Grandpa?" "All in good time, my boy, all in good time. Which end do you think I ought to open first?" "That corner, the one furthest from you. Just tear off a tiny bit, not quite enough for us to see anything." "Like that," said the old man. "Yes, now a little bit more." "You finish it," said Grandpa Joe. "I'm too nervous." "No, Grandpa, you must do it yourself." "Very well then, here it goes." They both stared at what lay underneath. It was a bar of chocolate and nothing more. All at once they both saw the funny side of the whole thing and burst into peals of laughter. "What on earth is going on?" cried Grandma Josephine, waking up suddenly. "Nothing," said Grandpa Joe. "You go back on to sleep." "Oh, so that's 2 chocolate bars and he's still not got a ticket. But there is still one left to find." Chapter 10. Oh dear, the family begins to starve. During the next 2 weeks, the weather turned very cold. First came the snow. It suddenly began one morning just as Charlie Bucket was getting dressed for school. Standing by the window, he saw a huge flake drifting slowly down an icy sky that was the colour of steel. That's a really good sentence. Let's read it again. The huge flakes slowly drifting, so we've got our adverb in there, down an icy sky that was colour of steel. To remember that when we get back to school and do all our writing. By the evening, it lay 4 feet deep around the tiny house. Mr. Bucket had to dig a path from the front door to the road. After the snow, there came a freezing gale that blew for days and days without stopping. Oh, and oh, how bitter cold it was. Everything that Charlie touched seemed to be made of ice. And each time he stepped outside the door, the wind was like a knife on his cheek. Well, it was so cold it felt really sore on his cheeks. Inside the house, little jets of freezing air came rushing in through the sides of the windows and under the door, and there was no place to go and escape them. The 4 old ones lay silent and huddled in their bed, trying to keep the cold out of their bones. The excitement over the golden tickets had long since been forgotten. Nobody in the family gave a thought now to anything except the 2 vital problems: trying to keep warm and trying to get enough to eat. There was something very cold about the weather that gives one an enormous appetite. Many of us find ourselves beginning to crave rich, steaming stews and hot apple pies and all kinds of delicious warming dishes. And because we're all a great deal luckier than we realise, we usually get what we want, or near enough. But Charlie Bucket never got what he wanted because the family couldn't afford it, and the cold weather went on, and he became ravenously and desperately hungry. Both bars of chocolate, the birthday one and the one Grandpa Joe had bought, had long since been nibbled away, and all he got now was those thin, cabbagey meals 3 times a day. Then all at once the meals even became thinner. The reason for this was that the toothpaste factory, the place where Mr. Bucket worked, suddenly went bust and had to close down. Quickly Mr. Bucket tried to get another job, but he had no luck. In the end, the only way that he was managing to earn a few pennies was by shoveling snow in the streets. But that wasn't even enough to buy a quarter of the foods that 7 people needed. The situation was becoming quite desperate. Breakfast was a single slice of bread for each person now, and lunch, maybe half a boiled potato. Slowly but surely, everyone in the house was beginning to starve. Every day, little Charlie Bucket, trudging through the snow on his way to school, would have to pass Mr. Willy Wonka's giant chocolate factory. You go look at little Charlie by the gate. Every day he came near to it, he would lift his small pointed nose to the air and sniff the wonderful sweet smell of melting chocolate. Sometimes he would stand motionless outside the gates for several minutes on end, taking deep swollen breaths as though he was trying to eat the smell itself. "That child," said Grandpa Joe, poking his head from under the blanket one icy morning, "that child has got to have more food. It doesn't matter about us. We're too old to bother with. But a growing boy, he can't go on like this. He's beginning to look like a skeleton." "What can we do?" murmured Grandma Josephine miserably. "He refuses to take any of ours. I heard his mother try to slip her own piece of bread on his plate at breakfast this morning. He wouldn't touch it. He made her take it back." "He's a fine little fellow, he is," said Grandpa George. "He deserves better than all this." The cool weather went on, and every day Charlie Bucket grew thinner and thinner. His face became frighteningly white and pinched. The skin was so drawn over his cheeks that you could see the shapes of his bones underneath. It seemed doubtful whether he could go on much longer without becoming dangerously ill. And now, very calmly, with that curious wisdom that seems to come so often to small children in times of hardship, he began to make little changes here and there in some of the things he did, so to save his strength. In the morning, he left the house 10 minutes earlier so he could walk slowly to school without ever having to run. He sat quietly in the classroom during break time, resting himself, while the others rushed outdoors and threw snowballs and wrestled in the snow. Everything he did now, he did slowly and carefully to prevent exhaustion. Then one afternoon, walking back in the icy wind, and incidentally feeling hungrier than he had ever felt before, his eye was caught suddenly to something silvery lying in the gutter. Charlie stepped off the curb and bent down to examine it. Part of it was buried under the snow, but he saw at once what it was. It was a 50-pence piece. Quickly he looked around him. Had someone dropped it? No, that was impossible because of the way part of it had been buried. Several people were hurrying past him on the pavement, their chins sunk deep into their collars of their coats, feet crunching on the snow. None of them was searching for money. None of them was even taking the slightest bit of notice of the small boy crouching in the gutter. Then this was his. This 50-pence. Could he have it? Carefully, Charlie pulled it from under the snow. It was damp and dirty, but otherwise perfect. Here goes Charlie looking in the snow in the gutter. A whole 50p. He held it tightly between his shivering fingers, gazing at it. It meant one thing for him at the moment, and only one thing. It meant food. Automatically, Charlie turned and began moving towards the nearest shop. It was only 10 paces away. It was a newspaper and stationery shop, the kind that sells almost everything, including sweets and cigars. And what he would do, he whispered quickly to himself, he would buy one luscious bar of chocolate and eat it all up, every bit of it, right there and then. And then the rest of the money he would take straight back home and give to his mother. Oh, and we're going to be stopping there today. Tomorrow we'll have to read chapter 11, The Miracle. So I wonder what's going to happen when Charlie buys that chocolate bar.